The mahogany doors of First National Trust weighed 1,000 pounds that February morning, or at least that's how they felt to Raymond Holloway's trembling hands. His Italian leather shoes, the last pair he owned that hadn't been seized by federal agents, clicked against marble floors that seemed to stretch forever. Each step echoed like a countdown to his final humiliation. This wasn't supposed to be his story. Men like Raymond Holloway didn't beg. They commanded boardrooms, moved millions with a phone call, and built empires that touched the sky. But here he was, 52 years old, walking into a bank not as a conqueror but as a broken man desperate for mercy. His lawyer had called it his last shot. If this meeting failed, everything would be gone by Monday. The properties, the business stakes, even the illusion that he might somehow climb back from the abyss. 20 years ago, Raymond had been unstoppable. He'd owned half of Manhattan's commercial real estate, flew private to 3 countries a week, and had his name whispered in the same conversations as Buffett and Bezos. The kind of money that doesn't just buy things, it buys people, influence, and the dangerous belief that you're untouchable. But federal investigations have a funny way of humbling giants. Insider trading charges, tax evasion, embezzlement. The accusations had stripped him bare, leaving him with nothing but 2 struggling properties and debts that grew larger every time his lawyers opened their mouths. The executive assistant who greeted him barely made eye contact. She knew who he was. Everyone in New York's financial world knew about Raymond Holloway's spectacular fall. She led him to the 40th floor, to a conference room where his fate would be decided by someone he'd never met. The CEO of First National Trust, the person who held the power to either save him or finish what the FBI had started. "Ms. Rodriguez will be with you shortly," the assistant said. Raymond's blood turned to ice. Rodriguez? No, it couldn't be. I know this is heavy, but if you've ever had to face a moment where you felt everything was slipping away, I need you to hit subscribe. If you're not ready to subscribe, it's okay. Just tell me why in the comments. Let's talk, let's connect. Raymond Holloway grew up watching his father disappear into numbers. Every night at 6:47 p.m., Harold Holloway would walk through the front door of their Connecticut home, shoulders bent, eyes vacant, carrying the weight of other people's money. He was an accountant at a firm that treated him like furniture, necessary, functional, forgotten. Raymond would watch his father eat dinner in silence, review ledgers until midnight, then wake up at 5:30 a.m. to do it all over again. "That's not living," 15-year-old Raymond had told his mother one night. "That's just existing." His mother had given him a sad smile. "Your father provides for us. That's what matters." But Raymond wanted more than provision. He wanted power. He wanted to walk into rooms and watch them reorganize themselves around his presence. He wanted the kind of success that made his father's quiet dedication look like surrender. So he studied like his life depended on it, because in his mind it did. Yale for undergrad, scholarship plus 3 jobs, then Harvard Business School, where everything changed. He met Amelia Rodriguez during a corporate finance seminar in his second year. She sat 3 rows ahead, and when Professor Davidson asked about leveraged buyout strategies, her hand shot up first. Her answer was brilliant, unconventional, and completely destroyed the traditional approach Raymond had been about to suggest. He found himself leaning forward, captivated not by her beauty, though she was beautiful, but by her mind. After class, he intercepted her at the coffee cart. "Your LBO analysis was wrong," he said, knowing it wasn't. She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Really? Enlighten me." "You assumed rational market behavior. Markets are never rational, neither are men who lie about my analysis being wrong just to start a conversation." He laughed, caught. "Raymond Holloway, I know who you are. Connecticut money, Yale summa cum laude, internship at Goldman Sachs." She gathered her books. "I also know you're used to women being impressed by that resume. And you're not?" "I'm Amelia Rodriguez. State school, worked 3 jobs to get here, and I'll graduate with twice the job offers you will because I don't rely on connections. I make them." That confidence should have intimidated him. Instead, it ignited something. They became study partners officially, but their late-night sessions, in Baker Library were about more than financial models. She challenged everything he believed about success, money, and purpose. "You're so terrified of becoming your father that you've never asked if he might be happy," she told him one night at 2 a.m., empty coffee cups scattered between them. They'd been arguing about corporate responsibility versus profit maximization. Happy? He's a ghost walking through his own life. Maybe. Or maybe he finds meaning in stability, in knowing his family is secure. Maybe success isn't about conquering the world. Maybe it's about building something worth protecting. Her perspective came from experience. She'd grown up in Brownsville, Texas, watching her immigrant parents build a restaurant from nothing. Her father worked 18-hour days. Her mother managed the books while raising 4 kids. But they laughed at dinner, danced in the kitchen on Sundays, and knew every customer by name. "They're millionaires in everything that matters," Amelia said. "Community, family, purpose. Your father might understand that better than you think." By spring semester, their study sessions had evolved into something neither had planned. Raymond found himself inventing reasons to see her, and she stopped pretending she minded. When he kissed her after their corporate strategy final, she kissed him back like she'd been waiting for it. They married 3 months after graduation in her family's backyard in Brownsville. No country club, no Harvard connections, just her enormous Mexican-American family embracing him like he'd always belonged there. Her grandmother, speaking through Amelia's translation, pressed a worn medallion of St. Joseph into his palm during the reception. "Tell her I'll protect you," Raymond had said, meaning it completely in that moment. The medallion, he'd kept it in his wallet those first few months at Titan Capital, Raymond's first job out of Harvard. The private equity firm was known for hostile takeovers, aggressive restructuring, and profits that made moral flexibility a job requirement. The starting salary was more than his father had ever made in his best year. Amelia had taken a job with a nonprofit focused on microfinance for immigrant communities. The contrast in their worlds became stark immediately. He'd come home at 2 a.m. talking about billion-dollar acquisitions. She'd share stories about helping a Guatemalan family secure a $5,000 loan to expand their food truck. "We're both in finance," she'd joke, but the humor grew thinner as his hours grew longer and his values grew more flexible. The medallion stayed in his wallet, forgotten, as Raymond rose through Titan's ranks with meteoric speed. He told himself he was building their future. He told himself Amelia would understand once she saw what he could provide. He told himself many things that ambitious men tell themselves when they're choosing empire over everything else. The pregnancy test came wrapped in a yellow ribbon on a Sunday morning in October. Raymond had been reviewing acquisition reports on his laptop when Amelia placed the small box beside his coffee mug. He looked up, confused by the interruption, then saw her face, nervous, hopeful, glowing with something he couldn't quite place. "Yellow?" he asked, picking up the box. "Because we don't know if it's a boy or girl yet, and because yellow is hopeful." "Open it." Inside, the 2 pink lines stared back at him like an accusation. Or maybe a promise. For exactly 3 seconds, Raymond felt pure joy, the kind that bypasses thought and goes straight to the soul. He was going to be a father. They were going to be a family. Then Richard Cromwell called. Richard Cromwell didn't call associates directly unless he was about to change their lives. The founding partner of Titan Capital had built his empire on perfect timing and ruthless execution. When Raymond answered, Cromwell's voice was characteristically direct. "Hong Kong. 2 years minimum. You'll run our entire Asian expansion. The board approved it this morning. You leave in 3 weeks." Raymond's hand found Amelia's across the table, the pregnancy test still between them. "Sir, I need to discuss this with—" "There's no discussion, Holloway. This is the opportunity, the one that separates the players from the legends. Morrison was my first choice, but I'm giving it to you. Don't make me regret it." After Cromwell hung up, the kitchen felt smaller. Amelia was staring at him, reading his face like she always could. "You're going to take it," she said. "Not a question. It's Hong Kong, the entire Asian market. This sets us up for life. The baby will have everything. The baby needs a father, not a bank account. I'll be a father. Just From Hong Kong initially. You can join me after the birth once things are settled. Amelia stood up slowly, her hand protective over her still flat stomach. Do you hear yourself? Once things are settled? When has anything in your life ever been settled? There's always another deal, another opportunity, another mountain to climb. This is different. No, Raymond, this is exactly the same. Except now you're not just choosing your career over me, you're choosing it over our child. The argument that followed was the worst they'd ever had. Raymond accused her of not understanding what it took to succeed at his level, of trying to trap him in mediocrity. She accused him of becoming exactly what he'd sworn he'd never be, his father, except worse, because at least Harold Holloway had stayed. Your father might have been tired, but he was there, Amelia said, tears streaming down her face. Every night at 6:47 he walked through that door. You're about to walk out and never come back. That's not true. Stop lying to me. Stop lying to yourself. If you get on that plane, we both know how this ends. Raymond slept in his office that night, and the next, and the next. He convinced himself he was giving her time to calm down, to see reason. But really, he was already gone. The Hong Kong opportunity consumed him. The deals he'd make, the reputation he'd build, the empire he'd create. In his mind, he was doing it for them, for the family. But hearts know the truth even when minds won't admit it. Listen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest in the comments. If you were in Raymond's shoes, if you had to choose between a once-in-a-lifetime career opportunity and being there for your pregnant partner, what would you have chosen? Don't give me the easy answer. Tell me what you really think you would have done. Would you have stayed, or would you have convinced yourself, like Raymond did, that providing meant more than presence? Comment below. Let's have a real conversation about this. The leaving itself was an act of cowardice that would haunt him forever. Tuesday morning, November 15th. Amelia had a prenatal appointment at 9 a.m. Raymond knew because he'd seen it circled on the calendar. Her first ultrasound. While she was looking at their baby for the first time, he was boarding a Cathay Pacific flight to Hong Kong. He left a letter. Corporate speak dressed up as emotion. Terms like financial security and long-term stability and provisional arrangement. He set up trust funds, automatic transfers, everything money could buy except the one thing she needed, him. He promised to be in touch once he was established, knowing even as he wrote the words that they were lies dressed up as good intentions. The divorce papers arrived 6 months later at his Hong Kong office. Amelia hadn't asked for anything beyond the initial settlement. No alimony, no property claims, no demand for half his Titan Capital shares. Her lawyer's cover letter was brief. Ms. Rodriguez wants nothing from Mr. Holloway except the dissolution of this marriage. Raymond signed them immediately, telling himself it was best for everyone. Clean break, fresh start. He threw himself into the Asian markets with the fury of a man running from something. Within a year, he was Titan's top producer. Within 2 years, he was worth more than he'd ever dreamed. But sometimes, late at night in his Harbor City penthouse, he'd think about that yellow ribbon. Hope, she'd called it. He'd wonder if the baby had been born, if it was a boy or girl, if they had Amelia's eyes or his stubborn chin. Then he'd pour another whiskey and review another deal, because wondering was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not if he wanted to keep running. Amelia Rodriguez gave birth to Carmen on July 18th at 3:47 a.m. in Brownsville Medical Center. Her mother held one hand, her sister held the other, and where Raymond should have been, there was only empty space and the echo of promises that meant nothing. The baby came out screaming, fierce and alive, with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin, though Amelia would never tell anyone about that last part. The first year was darkness disguised as days. Amelia moved back into her childhood bedroom, 31 years old with a Harvard MBA and a baby who wouldn't sleep. Her parents never said "we told you so," but their silence spoke volumes. She'd been their miracle child, the one who made it out, who conquered the Ivy League. Now she was home, selling the diamond earrings Raymond had given her for their first anniversary just to buy formula and diapers. But Rodriguez women don't stay down. Her father had crossed a desert with nothing but hope. Her mother had built a restaurant from recipes and determination. Amelia looked at Carmen one night, the baby finally quiet in her arms, and made a decision. She wouldn't just survive. She would build something Raymond could never destroy, a life of meaning. She started small. The owner of the local hardware store needed help restructuring his debt. Amelia did it for free, using Carmen's nap time to build spreadsheets and payment plans. Word spread. The Harvard girl who came home knew how to save businesses. Within 6 months, she had 5 clients. Within a year, she had hired her first employee, her cousin Maria, who watched Carmen while Amelia met with clients. Carmen grew up in that makeshift office, playing under conference tables made from doors and sawhorses. She learned to walk holding onto filing cabinets. Her first words were mama, and oddly enough, profit margin, which made everyone laugh until they realized a toddler had been absorbing every conversation. By the time Carmen was 5, Amelia had 12 employees and a real office in downtown Brownsville. Rodriguez Consulting Group specialized in saving businesses others had written off. The local banks started referring their troubled clients to her. She had a gift for seeing potential where others saw failure, for finding paths forward when everyone else saw dead ends. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Kindly pay attention because this is important. Carmen was 8 when Amelia created what would become her signature innovation. A client had come to her in tears, a bakery owner who'd failed once before, declaring bankruptcy after a partner embezzled everything. The banks wouldn't touch her. But Amelia saw something others didn't. Failure was education disguised as pain. What if Amelia proposed to Lone Star Regional Bank, where she'd just accepted a VP position? We created a fund specifically for people who failed before. Not despite their failure, but because of it. They've already paid tuition in the school of hard lessons. They won't make the same mistakes twice. The Phoenix Fund launched 6 months later. It provided capital and mentorship to entrepreneurs recovering from bankruptcy or business failure. The default rate was 60% lower than traditional small business loans. The program got national attention. Within 2 years, Amelia was recruited by First National Trust in New York to replicate the model on a larger scale. Meanwhile, Raymond Holloway was building his own empire in Hong Kong. The Asian markets were everything Cromwell had promised: wild, lucrative, intoxicating. He worked 20-hour days, slept in the office, and measured his worth in zeros added to his net worth. He married a British investment banker named Margaret in year 3. She understood the game, or so he thought. They divorced 18 months later when she realized Raymond loved the deal more than he could ever love a person. His second marriage lasted even less time. Vivian was a fashion executive who mistook Raymond's wealth for depth. When she discovered there was nothing beneath the surface except more surface, she left with a settlement that barely dented his billions but confirmed what he already knew. He was incapable of real connection. The Hong Kong years blurred together. Deals worth billions, penthouses with views of Victoria Harbour, a different charity gala every weekend where he'd write checks to causes he'd forget by morning. He was mentioned in the same breath as the biggest players in global finance. Forbes did a profile. The Wall Street Journal called him the king of Asian acquisitions. But kings who build kingdoms on questionable foundations eventually face the consequences. It started small, a routine audit of one of his acquisitions. The numbers didn't quite add up, not obviously fraudulent, just creative. The kind of accounting that worked in Hong Kong's loose regulatory environment but would never fly under scrutiny. Then came the whistleblower. A junior analyst Raymond had fired for asking too many questions. The kid had kept copies of everything. Emails, wire transfers, documents that showed a pattern of insider trading so obvious that even Raymond's lawyers struggled to explain it away. The investigation started in Hong Kong, spread to New York, then went federal. By year 19, Raymond Holloway's empire was under siege from every direction. The FBI, the SEC, the Justice Department, they all wanted their piece of him. His former partners at Titan Capital claimed complete ignorance, threw him under every bus they could find. The billions he'd accumulated were frozen faster than he could move them. The man who'd abandoned everything for money was about to lose the only thing he'd ever truly loved. Carmen, meanwhile, had just started her sophomore year at Stanford, studying computer science and social entrepreneurship. She was building apps to help small businesses and immigrant communities access capital. She had her mother's brilliance, her grandmother's warmth, and absolutely no idea that her father was about to walk back into their lives in the most unexpected way possible. The first domino fell on a Tuesday. FBI agents arrived at Raymond's Hong Kong office with warrants and questions about a deal from 3 years prior. He wasn't worried. He had lawyers for this kind of thing. By Thursday, they'd frozen his primary accounts. By the following Monday, the charges had multiplied like cancer cells: insider trading, tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering. Each accusation built on the last, creating a tower of legal problems that reached toward life in prison. Raymond called Richard Cromwell from his apartment at 2 a.m. Hong Kong time, desperate for support from his mentor, the man who'd sent him to Asia, who'd made him rich beyond imagination. "Raymond who?" Cromwell said, his voice cold as Manhattan winter. "I don't know anyone by that name, and if you call this number again, I'll have you charged with harassment." The line went dead. 20 years of loyalty, of making Cromwell and Titan Capital billions, erased in 8 seconds. His so-called friends disappeared even faster. The hedge fund managers who'd celebrated with him in Vegas, the investment bankers who'd called him brother, the society crowd who'd fought for invitations to his parties. They all developed sudden amnesia. Their lawyers sent formal letters distancing themselves from Raymond Holloway and his alleged activities. His country club membership was revoked. His name was removed from charity boards. The doorman at his Manhattan building was instructed not to let him in, even though he owned the penthouse. The asset freeze was surgical in its brutality. Every account, every property, every investment, locked. The FBI had gotten cooperation from Hong Kong authorities, Swiss banks, Cayman Island institutions. Raymond went from billionaire to beggar in the span of 72 hours. They left him just enough to pay for a lawyer and basic living expenses. A calculated humiliation that forced him to budget for groceries for the first time since college. His legal team abandoned him when the retainer ran out, except for one, David Kenworth, a public defender turned private practice, who took cases others wouldn't touch. Not because he believed in Raymond's innocence, but because he believed everyone deserved representation. "You're looking at 20 to 30 years if convicted on all counts," Kenworth told him over coffee in a Queen's diner, the only place Raymond could afford. "The evidence is overwhelming. Your best bet is a plea deal, but even that means significant time. There has to be another way. There is one option. First National Trust holds notes on your remaining properties, the ones in Queens that somehow escaped the freeze. If they call in those loans, you're completely finished. But if you can restructure, if you can convince them to work with you, you might have something to rebuild from when this is over." "Why would they help me?" "They have this program, the Phoenix Fund. It's for businesses and people in distress. Second chances for those who failed. The CEO, Rodriguez, has a reputation for taking risks on lost causes. Here's the thing about falling from the top. It's not the money you lose that breaks you. It's discovering that everything you built your life on was as temporary as morning frost." Raymond was about to learn that money wasn't his biggest loss. The real tragedy was what he'd traded for it, the life he could have lived, the family he should have cherished, the man he might have been. Raymond stared at the coffee stain on the diner table, processing the cosmic joke of his situation. He'd have to beg. Him, Raymond Holloway, the man who'd made CEOs wait, who'd destroyed companies with a phone call, who'd treated mercy like weakness. Now he needed it more than oxygen. "Set up the meeting," he told Kenworth. "There's something else you should know. The CEO, Rodriguez, she's tough. Harvard MBA, built her career on helping people banks wouldn't touch. But she's also known for requiring absolute honesty. If you try to play her, if you go in there with anything less than complete humility, she'll destroy you." Raymond almost laughed. Humility. He'd have to remember what that felt like. The meeting was scheduled for February 15th. Raymond spent the night before practicing what he'd say, how he'd present himself. He tried on his last good suit, noticed how it hung loose on his frame. Stress had carved 20 pounds from his body. He looked in the mirror and saw his father staring back. Not the tired accountant he'd run from, but something worse, a man who'd gained the whole world and lost his soul, except he'd also lost the world. In the morning, he'd walk into First National Trust with nothing but desperation and a fool's hope that someone might see something worth saving in the wreckage of Raymond Holloway. He had no idea that the universe had saved its cruelest joke for last, that karma had been patient but was finally ready to collect, that the CEO waiting in that boardroom would be the one person who had every reason to let him burn. The conference room on the 40th floor had windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Manhattan sprawled below like a kingdom Raymond once ruled. He poured himself water with shaking hands, the crystal pitcher heavy with meaning. Everything in this room spoke of power, success, permanence, everything he'd lost. "Miss Rodriguez will be with you shortly." The assistant's words echoed in his skull. Rodriguez, his throat constricted. How many people named Rodriguez could be running major New York banks? He told himself it was coincidence. The universe wasn't that precise in its punishments. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking, and deep in his gut he knew. He knew before the door opened. He knew before she walked in. He knew because life has a way of bringing you face to face with your choices, especially the ones you've spent 20 years running from. When Amelia entered, time folded in on itself. She was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Raymond's remaining monthly budget. Her hair, once wild and free during their Harvard days, was pulled back in a style that meant business. The nervous girl who'd wrapped a pregnancy test in yellow ribbon had been replaced by someone who commanded the room simply by entering it. But it was her eyes that stopped his heart. The same brown eyes that had once looked at him with love, now holding absolutely nothing. Not anger, not hatred, just nothing. "Mr. Holloway," she said, sitting across from him with a folder that might as well have been his execution order. "I understand you're requesting restructuring of your loans with First National Trust." She didn't acknowledge their history, didn't flinch at his name, treated him like any other desperate borrower sitting in that chair. Raymond found himself studying her face, searching for some sign of the woman who'd challenged him in late-night study sessions, who danced with him at their wedding while her grandmother sang Mexican folk songs. That woman was gone, or buried so deep she might as well be. "Amelia," he started, his voice cracking. "Miss Rodriguez," she corrected, smooth as glass. "Let's maintain professional boundaries, Mr. Holloway. According to our records, you're requesting payment modification on 2 commercial properties with a combined debt of $3.2 million. You're currently 4 months behind on payments." She opened the folder, revealing his financial autopsy. "Your assets have been frozen by federal authorities. You're facing multiple criminal charges. Our risk assessment team has recommended immediate foreclosure. Can you provide any reason why First National Trust should deviate from that recommendation?" Raymond's prepared speech evaporated. Sitting across from her, seeing what she'd become while he was building sandcastles in Hong Kong, he understood the real loss. Not the money, not the reputation, but this, the life he'd walked away from. "I know how this looks," he managed, "but I have a restructuring plan. The import business has contracts pending." "I've reviewed your proposal," she cut him off with the efficiency of someone who'd heard every excuse, every promise, every desperate plea. "It's ambitious, but relies on assumptions our analysts find questionable." She paused, and for a moment Raymond thought he saw something flicker behind her professional mask. "However, First National Trust has recently implemented a program for distressed business rehabilitation. It's called the Phoenix Fund." The Phoenix Fund. Raymond had researched it. Amelia's signature innovation, the program that had made her famous in banking circles. It offered second chances to those who'd failed, but with conditions that stripped away pride and demanded transformation. "The terms are non-negotiable," she continued. "You would retain a 30% stake in your properties, but First National Trust would assume management control. All decisions over $10,000 would require our approval. You'd essentially become an employee of your own former holdings." The humiliation of it burned. but Raymond nodded. What choice did he have? Additionally, Amelia's voice remained steady. 20% of any eventual profits would go directly to our community development fund, which provides microloans to immigrant entrepreneurs. The irony was so perfect it almost made him laugh. He'd left her while she was working with immigrant communities. Now his financial survival would directly support that same cause. But wait, this is where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Not even Raymond. There's one more requirement, Amelia said, and for the first time, something personal crept into her tone. The Phoenix Fund requires all participants to complete our financial ethics program. 6 months of classes, every Saturday, 8 hours a day. You'll also perform 20 hours weekly of community service with our partner organizations, specifically mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. She leaned forward slightly. The program is designed to rebuild not just businesses, Mr. Holloway, but character. You'll be working directly with people who have nothing, teaching them what you've learned from having everything and losing it. The completion rate is 40%. Most people find it easier to declare bankruptcy than face themselves for 6 months. Raymond looked at her, really looked at her. This wasn't just about saving his properties. This was Amelia offering him something he didn't deserve, a chance to become someone different. Why? The word came out raw. Why offer me anything? You have every reason to let me fail. For the first time since entering the room, Amelia's professional armor cracked. She was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. Because I learned long ago that revenge is a poison that hurts the person holding it more than its target. Because I believe in second chances, even for people who don't deserve them. She paused. And because Carmen deserves to know that when given the choice between vengeance and grace, her mother chose grace. Carmen, their daughter. The child he'd never met, never held, never even seen a picture of. The name hit him like a physical blow. She doesn't know about me, he said. It wasn't a question. She knows her father chose his career over his family. She knows he left before she was born and never looked back. She's made her peace with it. Amelia's voice softened just slightly. She's remarkable, actually. Sophomore at Stanford, double major in computer science and social entrepreneurship. She's building technology to help underserved communities access financial services. She's everything you could have hoped for in a daughter, and nothing you had a hand in creating. The words weren't meant to wound, just to state fact. But they destroyed Raymond more thoroughly than any federal investigation could. His daughter was out there, brilliant and driven, changing the world in ways he'd never thought to try. And she'd done it all without him. I'll take your offer, he said, voice rough with emotion he couldn't hide, all of it. The oversight, the classes, the community service. Whatever it takes. Amelia nodded, sliding the contract across the mahogany table. The program starts Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late, Mr. Holloway. The Phoenix Fund offers second chances, not third ones. She stood to leave, and Raymond found himself on his feet, words tumbling out before he could stop them. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between them. I know it means nothing now. I know it changes nothing. But I need you to know that leaving you, leaving her, it was the worst decision I ever made. Not because of how things turned out for me, but because of what I missed, what I threw away. Amelia paused at the door, her back to him. The silence stretched until Raymond thought she might leave without responding. When she finally spoke, her voice carried 20 years of hard-won wisdom. I spent years hating you, Raymond. Years wondering what I'd done wrong, why I wasn't enough to make you stay. But eventually, I realized the problem was never me. You were so afraid of being ordinary that you ran from the most extraordinary thing that ever happened to you. The chance to be a father, to be part of a real family, to matter to someone for reasons that had nothing to do with money. She turned to face him one last time, and Raymond saw that the indifference in her eyes had been replaced by something else. Perhaps pity, perhaps peace, perhaps just the exhaustion that comes from carrying old wounds too long. Your apology is 20 years too late for me to need it, she said. but maybe it's right on time for you to start becoming the man you should have been all along." Amelia stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the afternoon light filtering through the conference room windows. She didn't leave immediately. Instead, she turned back to face Raymond one more time, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of years spent transforming pain into purpose. "You want to know something? For the first 5 years after you left, I woke up every morning angry. Not sad, angry. I'd look at Carmen sleeping in her crib, this perfect little person who deserved everything, and I'd feel this rage that threatened to consume me. How dare you miss her first smile, her first word, her first step? How dare you choose spreadsheets over bedtime stories?" She moved back toward the table, not sitting, just standing there with her hands resting on the back of the chair she'd occupied minutes before. "But anger is exhausting, Raymond. It takes so much energy to hate someone, energy I needed for Carmen, for building something from nothing. So around year 7, the anger transformed into something else. Pity. I pitied you. This man so terrified of mediocrity that he sprinted away from meaning. You were so afraid of being ordinary that you never realized ordinary moments. Teaching your daughter to ride a bike, helping with homework, Sunday pancakes. Those are the experiences that make life extraordinary." Raymond couldn't meet her eyes. Every word was truth crystallized into language. "The real tragedy isn't that you left," Amelia continued. "It's what you left for. You traded a family for numbers on screens, traded being someone's hero for being everyone's enemy. You know what Carmen said when she was 12? She asked me if her father was dead. I told her no, and she said, 'Then he chose to be gone, which means I wasn't worth staying for.' Try explaining to a 12-year-old why that's not true when you're not sure yourself." She pulled out her phone, scrolled for a moment, then showed him the screen. A young woman smiled back, confident, radiant, alive. Carmen at 20, accepting some kind of award, her mother's features mixed with something achingly familiar in the set of her jaw, the determination in her eyes. "This is what you missed. Not just the photos, but the person. She volunteers at homeless shelters every Thanksgiving because she says privilege without purpose is waste. She taught herself 3 programming languages because she wanted to build an app that helps undocumented workers file taxes safely. She refuses to date anyone who treats service workers poorly because, in her words, how someone treats people who can't benefit them reveals their true character." Amelia put the phone away. "She became everything you could have been if you'd chosen differently. Successful without sacrificing soul, ambitious without abandoning ethics. She learned from your absence what not to become." The silence that followed felt like judgment and absolution mixed together. "The Phoenix Fund isn't just about financial restructuring," Amelia said, moving toward the door again. "It's about resurrection. You've already died, Raymond. The man you were, the empire you built, it's all ashes now. The question is whether you have the courage to rise from those ashes as something better." She paused at the threshold. "Every Saturday for 6 months, you'll sit in a classroom with people who've lost everything, immigrants who fled violence, entrepreneurs whose dreams collapsed, regular people whom life knocked down hard. You'll share your story, and they'll share theirs. You'll teach them about finance, and they'll teach you about resilience. Maybe if you actually listen, if you genuinely engage, you'll learn what real wealth looks like." "Will I?" Raymond started, then stopped, unsure if he had the right to ask. "Will you ever meet Carmen?" Amelia finished for him. "That's not my decision to make. She's an adult now, with her own life, her own choices. But I will tell you this. She judges people by their actions, not their words. So if you want any chance of knowing your daughter, you'd better become someone worth knowing." Amelia walked to the door one final time, her hand on the handle. "Your whole life you've been running towards something, success, wealth, power. Maybe it's time to stop running toward and start building from. The Phoenix Fund gives you that chance. Don't waste it. If you've ever felt like you've lost something, like Raymond has, and needed a second chance, subscribe now. We're all here together, supporting each other through the hard parts." Raymond sat alone in the conference room long after Amelia left, staring at the contract that would strip him of everything, except the chance to become someone new. The pen felt heavy in his hand as he signed his name, not the confident slash of Raymond Holloway, corporate raider, but the careful script of a man learning to write his story differently. The true cost had never been about money. Money was just paper and promises, numbers that could vanish overnight. The real price was paid in moments. First birthdays, bedtime stories, teaching someone to throw a baseball, holding someone when their heart broke for the first time. He'd purchased an empire with currency he could never earn back. Time. 6 months of Saturdays stretched ahead, 6 months of facing people who'd lost businesses, homes, hope, and finding ways to help them rebuild. 6 months of being nobody special, just another failure trying to rise. The humiliation would be constant, but maybe humiliation was just humility forced upon those too proud to find it themselves. He thought about Carmen, this stranger who carried half his DNA and none of his flaws. She was out there building technology to lift others up while he'd spent decades perfecting systems to tear companies apart. She measured success by impact, not income. Somehow, without him, she'd learned what he'd never understood. That significance beats success every time, that being needed beats being known, that one person whose life you change matters more than 1,000 who know your name. Raymond stood, looked out at Manhattan, this city that had once bowed to him and now barely knew he existed. Tomorrow he'd start over. Not at the top, but at the bottom, where all the best stories begin. He'd sit in a classroom with people the old Raymond would have ignored. He'd learn their names, their struggles, their dreams. Maybe, eventually, he'd earn the right to share his own. The question wasn't whether failures defined you. Everyone failed at something. The question was whether you let failure be your conclusion or your comma, your period, or your pause before the next sentence. Raymond Holloway the billionaire was dead. But Raymond Holloway the human being? That story was just beginning. Next time, billionaire CEO left pregnant wife for mistress. 20 years later, his daughter returned as his boss.